Hello, my name is Marco Sana from the Competition Enforcement Office, and welcome to Module 3, where we will discuss the filing of notification forms. So far, we've walked through how you can request pre-notification consultations and completing the notification forms. If you missed these videos, the links are available in the description down below. You may also access them from the PCC website. When you're done with filling out the notification forms, it's time to submit and file them. Let me guide you through the steps. Notification forms must be submitted in both digital and hard copy formats. Just a reminder, notifying parties must submit their notification forms simultaneously. The sufficiency determination stage shall commence only after all notifying parties have submitted the complete digital and hard copies of their respective notification forms. Hard copy submissions are still subject to evaluation before acceptance. MAUS staff will be available on-site to conduct a pre-evaluation of the notification form for completeness of the formal requirements. The formal requirements are formulated to ensure that the persons filing the notification form are duly authorized by the notifying parties and to ensure that the MAU's resources are efficiently allocated. Remember, the MAU may refuse to accept the forms if any of the parties fail to completely comply with the formal requirements. The formal requirements of notification include, first, the original form, signed and certified by a general partner of a partnership, an officer or director of a corporation, or in the case of a natural person, the natural person or his or her legal representative. The form must be duly notarized. Second, the original affidavit attesting to the fact that a definitive agreement has been signed and that each party has an intention of completing the proposed transaction in good faith. Third, in the case of a partnership or a corporation, the form shall also be accompanied by an original secretary certificate or a special power of attorney or its equivalent in foreign jurisdictions, naming the authorized signatory of the form as possessing actual authority to make the certification on behalf of the entity filing the notification. The secretary's certificate, special power of attorney, or its equivalent must also name the persons authorized to file and represent them before the PCC. Fourth, documents executed abroad must be duly authenticated either through an apostille or by consularization, whichever is applicable. All documents must be properly bound, with each document labeled and tabbed accordingly. For the electronic versions of the notification form and their attachments, each document must be saved as a separate file. The file name should indicate the corresponding appendix number and the name of the file. For the latest information on how to submit the electronic version of the notification form, please coordinate with MAU. If upon evaluation on-site, the notification forms and the appendices of the parties are deemed complete and in order by the MAU staff, a notification receiving form will be given to each of the notifying parties. It is only at this point that the MAU will formally receive the notification forms and appendices of the notifying parties. However, in case of non-acceptance due to reasons discussed earlier, the MAU staff will indicate in the parties' respective notification receiving forms the reason for the non-acceptance of the documents. Do not be discouraged if your forms are not accepted the first time. There is no limit to the number of times merger parties may refile their forms. Just make sure to avoid any acts of consummation prior to notification, and that the grounds for the non-acceptance are duly addressed before you refile. The act of submitting the notification forms does not mean that the proposed transaction has already been notified to the PCC. The Commission shall be deemed to have been notified only after parties have paid the filing fee. The timing of paying the filing fee will be discussed in the next module, the Conduct of Sufficiency Determination stage.
Must the parties file a new notification in case of changes in the transaction during the review?
As a rule, substantial changes to the transaction must be reported to the Commission to make sure that any effects on competition that might arise from the said changes are accounted for. Parties to a proposed transaction under review must inform the PCC of any substantial modification to the transaction. The Commission shall then determine if a new notification is required based on the information provided. The Commission may consider various instances a substantial modification, including: first, when merger parties assign their ownership, rights, or interests to other entities; second, when there is a change in the identity, type, or quantity of assets or shares purchased, among others; third, when the parties decide to abandon the notified merger, resulting in the withdrawal of the notification; and fourth, if another merger will be pursued in similar or related markets involving the same parties or any entity within their notifying group, their assigns, or successors in interest.
Must parties inform the PCC of anticipated mergers between notifying parties?
Yes, merger parties must also inform the PCC if another merger will be pursued in similar or related markets involving the same parties or any entity within their notifying group, their assigns, or successors in interest. Since the PCC adheres to a compulsory notification regime, the parties cannot proceed to consummate the transaction without first securing the clearance of the Commission. Notifying parties must submit their notification forms within 30 days from the signing of definitive agreements relating to the transaction. Transacting parties must still comply with the 30-day notification period, even when they have pending requirements or applications with other regulatory agencies. Please note that if the last day of the notification period falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or non-working holiday, the notification form may be submitted by the notifying parties on the next business day. Please note, however, that certain transactions may have different deadlines for the submission of the notification form. For example, in a voting securities acquisition, the PCC allows the acquired entity to file at a later date than the acquiring entity. This is to give the acquired entity ample time to prepare the notification form after the acquiring entity proposes to buy and secure the voting shares from shareholders other than the issuer itself. Please be reminded that failure of the acquired entity to submit the notification form within the prescribed period may lead to insufficient information necessary for the review of the transaction, such that the Commission will be unable to complete its review within the initial 30-day period. Consequently, the Commission may be constrained to proceed to a Phase 2 review of the transaction.
Are the parties required to furnish the PCC a copy of the executed definitive agreement?
Yes, parties must furnish the PCC a copy of the final signed definitive agreement with the notification form. However, parties may also notify on the basis of a draft definitive agreement. In this case, don't forget to provide a written undertaking with the notification form to submit the final signed copy of the definitive agreement and to submit the final signed copy of the form within 2 calendar days from the execution thereof. This is important in confirming that the transaction under review or the transaction subject of the Commission decision is the same one agreed upon by the parties.
When is a merger or acquisition deemed consummated?
A merger or acquisition is consummated where the parties have transferred, conveyed, assigned, encumbered any right, title, interest, property or asset pursuant to the executed definitive agreement or agreements, or more generally, acted in exercise of their rights and obligations as transacting parties under the definitive agreement or agreements. Parties should also be careful as exchange of confidential information or human resources can also constitute consummation. Remember, parties to a notifiable transaction cannot proceed to consummate the transaction without receiving the Commission's clearance.
What is the consequence if a party fails to notify the PCC within the period for notification?
In general, merger parties and their ultimate parent entities, or UPEs, who failed to notify the PCC within 30 days from the signing of the definitive agreement relating to the transaction, but have yet to consummate the merger, will be fined in the amount of half of 1% of the value of the transaction, but not exceeding 2 million pesos. We hope we have clarified how and when notifying parties should file the notification forms before the PCC. Remember, notifying parties should direct all their communications and submissions to the Mergers and Acquisitions Office with address at the 25th floor, Verdes North Corporate Center 1, North Avenue, Quezon City, 1105. If you wish to be informed of the adjustments the MAU has made to its processes during the COVID-19 pandemic, please continue watching this video. The PCC issued the interim guidelines during periods of community quarantine last May 25, 2021 to facilitate compliance with PCC rules during the COVID-19 pandemic. The interim guidelines will continue to apply during periods of community quarantine without prejudice to additional protocols and procedures that the Commission may implement. Parties, however, must keep in mind that the additional steps to be discussed can further change or be repealed. Please monitor announcements and bulletins on the PCC website or coordinate with MAU staff for updates. Normally, the digital files must be submitted with the hard copy of the notification form. However, during the applicability of the interim guidelines, the PCC allowed hard copies to be submitted at a later date to accommodate health protocols. Please be guided that for any submission to be deemed complete, whether the initiatory notification form or any subsequent information required by the MAU, notifying parties must submit both electronic and hard copies thereof. During the implementation of interim guidelines, there have been adjustments on the deadline of filing, the manner of submission, and the appointment system. The 30-day notification period is waived during the applicability of the interim guidelines, provided that the 30th day of the parties falls within the community quarantine period. Parties may file notification forms at any time after the signing of definitive agreements relating to their transaction, but prior to any acts of consummation. In addition to the usual process of submitting the hard copies of the notification forms to the PCC office, the MAU requires parties to upload first the electronic copies of their filing to the PCC SharePoint facility. This additional step allows the handling lawyers to pre-evaluate the notification forms remotely. This replaces the former requirement of submitting the digital files in a USB storage device. Parties may access the SharePoint facility through the PCC website. Parties may access the PCC SharePoint facility only from Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., excluding holidays or the suspension of government work, as declared by the Office of the President or the local government of Quezon City. Electronic filings uploaded to the PCC SharePoint facility or received by the PCC through email beyond 5 p.m. shall be considered filed or transmitted at 8 a.m. of the next business day. To ensure that the notification forms are efficiently evaluated, notifying parties are strongly encouraged to file notification forms simultaneously. To reiterate, it must be noted that determination of sufficiency shall commence after all notifying parties have submitted their respective hard copies of their notification forms. Since parties are encouraged to upload the electronic copies of the notification forms prior to the submission of their physical copies to the PCC, parties shall be informed via email within 1 business day from transmittal of the documents through PCC SharePoint facility of any formal requirement found to be lacking by the MAU. The completion or correction of the electronic submission must be made within 5 business days, subject to any extension that may be granted upon the discretion of the MAU. Failure to complete the formal requirements within the prescribed period shall result in the non-acceptance of the electronic copy of the notification forms and its removal from the PCC SharePoint facility without prejudice to subsequent refiling. Hard copies already submitted to the MAU shall be returned to the filing parties. After parties have successfully uploaded the electronic copies of their notification forms, they must now secure an appointment to submit their hard copies to the PCC office. To ensure the safety of PCC staff and its stakeholders, external parties will be required to secure an appointment through the PCC Client Appointment System or PCAS at least 2 business days before their preferred schedule to visit the PCC office. Upon submission of an appointment request, a system-generated email acknowledging receipt of the request for appointment will be sent to the email address of the party. Please note, however, that this email does not yet constitute an approval of the requested appointment. If the requested schedule is available, the party shall receive a system-generated email confirming the appointment. If the requested schedule is unavailable, the party shall be informed by email. In such a case, the party may accomplish a new PCAS or propose a different schedule by email to the MAU. Moreover, before the party's visit to the PCC office, the party must accomplish the PCC Health Declaration form for external parties, which can be found in the confirmation email sent by the MAU. Upon arrival at Verdes North Corporate Center, or VNCC, the accomplished Health Declaration form must be presented to the VNCC receptionist together with a recent valid ID. The VNCC receptionist will verify the Health Declaration form and take a photo of the ID presented. Entry into the VNCC premises shall be allowed only after verification. Likewise, VNCC requires external parties to register on their visitor management system, replacing the manual visitor logbook and VNCC Health Declaration form. To cancel an appointment, the party must inform the MAU by email before their approved schedule. After the notifying parties have secured an appointment via PCAS, they may now submit hard copies of their notification forms to the PCC office on their scheduled visit. In connection with the utilization of the PCC SharePoint facility, parties are now required to accompany the hard copies of their filing with an affidavit by the filing party's authorized signatory, certifying that the hard copies and the electronic copies are complete and accurate copies of each other. Note that the submission of the hard copies must be made within the period provided in the interim guidelines. Generally, the allowable period to submit the hard copies depends on the imposed quarantine status, regardless of the alert levels, over the area where the PCC office is located. During alert levels 1 and 2, parties are allowed to submit the hard copies of their notification forms within 5 days from their electronic filing, and 7 days from the lifting of the alert levels 3, 4, and 5, or temporary closure of the PCC office. Further, parties may submit a request for an extension of period to cater the submission of their hard copies originating from abroad. Please take note that the MAU shall only commence evaluation of the notification form once the MAU has received the complete hard copies of the notification form, regardless of the alert level. There are only 2 changes made on the formal requirements during the applicability of the interim guidelines. During the applicability of the interim guidelines of the PCC during periods of community quarantine, the determination of sufficiency of notification forms for Phase 1 review shall proceed even if documents are not consularized, apostilled, or notarized, provided that the party shall submit a certification setting forth the reason for their failure to have the documents notarized, consularized, or apostilled, together with an undertaking to submit the notarized, consularized, or apostilled copies thereof soon after they have secured notarization of the documents or upon resumption of the operations of the consulate or embassy in the country where the consularization or apostillization is to be done. Also, originally, there was a requirement for the submission of a USB. However, at this time, this requirement was replaced by the PCC SharePoint facility. So, instead of submitting a USB containing all the files, notifying parties just have to upload the electronic copies of their notification forms and appendices online. Aside from the formal requirements, parties are also required to submit a written consent signed by their authorized signatory, granting the PCC staff permission to access the submitted documents and information outside the office premises of the PCC, as well as allowing the MAU staff to contact third parties about the proposed transaction during the sufficiency determination stage. The efficiency and accuracy of merger review depends largely on the quality and completeness of the information collected by the MAU. In this regard, the MAU may issue market inquiry letters or conduct market calls during the sufficiency determination stage to receive information from stakeholders in time for the merger review period. Note that this does not in any way signal the start of the merger review period, and only facilitates the evaluation of the sufficiency of the notification forms in preparation for merger review. Moreover, during the applicability of the interim guidelines, signatories to documents submitted electronically to the PCC may affix their electronic signatures in lieu of their wet signatures, provided that the original hard copies of said documents and not merely printouts of the documents submitted electronically are duly received by MAU. We hope this clarifies the adjustments done for filing your notification forms for the PCC under our interim guidelines. We will see you again in our final module, where we will discuss conduct of sufficiency determination stage. Thank you and mabuhay!